The cafe door gave a soft, tired chime as it opened, barely audible beneath the murmur of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. A rush of cold air followed the man in, carrying the sharp scent of rain, metal, and wet concrete. His coat was darkened in patches where the storm had soaked through, droplets sliding down the fabric and pooling onto the floor near his expensive shoes. He paused just inside the doorway, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the crowded space as if searching for an exit instead of a seat. He was used to boardrooms and glass towers, to people parting for him without him asking. Here no one noticed. He was just another tired stranger soaked by the world. Then he saw her, near the window, where streaks of rain painted thin lines across the glass. A girl sat in a wheelchair. The rest of the tables were filled with laughter, movement, noise, but her corner felt quiet, untouched. A mug sat in front of her, long forgotten, a thin circle of cold foam clinging to the ceramic. Her fingers traced the rim slowly, rhythmically, like she was holding on to something only she could feel. Despite the noise of the cafe, she looked completely still, completely alone, yet not lost. Her eyes lifted as if she had been waiting for this exact second. They locked onto him, and the world around him blurred. Those eyes held no surprise, no fear, only a calm recognition that made his chest tighten for no logical reason. Her hand stopped moving. She straightened slightly in her chair, as if gathering courage from somewhere deep inside her. "I saved this seat for you," she said. The words were simple, almost gentle, but they struck with the force of a confession. For a moment he couldn't breathe. He glanced around instinctively to see if she meant someone behind him. No one stood there. Only rain, the street, and his own reflection staring back through the glass. His heart gave a strange, painful pull. No one had ever saved him anything. No seat, no place, no moment. He had always arrived too late or too early or not at all. His eyes dropped to the empty chair across from her. Just a chair. But in that instant, it felt like an invitation into a life he didn't belong to. His muscles stiffened, his jaw tightened. The old instinct to retreat, to hide behind control and schedules and numbers, rose up inside him. This was wrong. This was strange. This was dangerous in a way he couldn't explain. And yet, something deeper, heavier, more wounded, pulled him closer. He stayed standing there for a heartbeat too long, rain still clinging to the ends of his hair, his fingers tightening around his phone, as if it were the only solid thing left in the room. Its screen lit up again in his palm, her name. Another call he didn't have the strength to answer. The past was persistent like that, demanding, loud, familiar. Across from him, the girl didn't rush, didn't fidget. She simply watched him, as if she already knew the war happening behind his eyes. The cafe noise seemed to fade around her. The scrape of cutlery, a burst of laughter, the clatter of cups, everything dulling, until it was just the two of them and the small empty space between the table and the chair she had saved. His gaze flicked once more around the cafe. Every seat taken. Bodies leaned into conversations, couples sharing desserts, laptops glowing, lives moving forward. There was nowhere else to go without turning back into the storm. The obvious choice sat right in front of him, yet it felt like stepping over an invisible line. He had spent years building around himself. "It's okay if you don't," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the soundtrack of rain tapping the glass. No pressure, no embarrassment. Just an acceptance that somehow made the moment heavier instead of lighter. That's the problem, he thought. Because he wanted to. God, he wanted to more than he should. A slow exhale left his chest, fogging briefly in the cool air of the doorway. He took one step forward, then another. The floor seemed to tilt slightly, as if the world itself noticed the choice he was making. His hand brushed the back of the chair, fingertips grazing the worn wood. It felt real, solid, warm from the cafe's lingering heat. He pulled it back and sat. The simple act sent a strange tremor through his body. When he met her eyes again from across the small round table, he was closer now, close enough to see the faint shadows under her lashes, the slight tremble in the corner of her mouth, the strength it took for her to sit there like this, so open to someone like him. Silence stretched between them, thick and alive, not awkward. something else, something unfamiliar. And for the first time in a very long while, he didn't reach for his phone. He studied her face now that he was close enough to see the smallest details. There was a quiet storm there, too, a tiredness that didn't belong to someone so young, a softness that looked like it had learned to survive on very little, the kind of eyes that had seen hospital walls instead of playgrounds, silence instead of parties, and yet there was something unbroken in them, something stubbornly alive. "You don't look like you belong to the noise of the world," she said. The words drifted between them, settling around his chest. For a moment, something inside him cracked open, a dull, unexpected ache. The noise of the world, the endless meetings, the cold glass offices, the driver waiting downstairs, the house that echoed with absence. No one had ever described him so simply and still been so right. He let out a low breath, more tired than he meant to show. "And you look like you know more about me than I'm ready to hear." Her lips curved, just slightly. Not a full smile. Something restrained, like she was trying not to step over another invisible line. But there was sadness in it too, the kind that whispered of long hours, spent watching the world through a window, instead of living inside it. "I just see what's in front of me," she murmured. "Most people don't look. They just pass." Her words hit deeper than he expected. He had spent years being seen, by the media, by employees, by investors. But none of them had ever truly looked at him like this. Not like a person, more like a breathing title. Someone useful, someone powerful, someone unreachable. The barista called out an order in the background. Dishes clinked. A couple laughed somewhere behind him. But the space between the two of them felt sealed off, suspended like time itself had paused. He leaned back slightly in his chair, eyes narrowing, voice low. "And what do you see right now?" She didn't hesitate. "Someone who never sits down." Her gaze dropped briefly to the chair, then rose again. "And today you finally did." The words settled over him, warm and painful at once. He felt strangely exposed, like she'd slid a hand into the deepest part of him without permission, and found the truth he hid even from himself. A shadow crossed the table as the waiter slowed beside them, his notepad hovering uncertainly in the air. His eyes moved from the girl's wheelchair to the man's perfectly tailored suit, lingering there a second too long, confusion and quiet judgment flickering over his face. People like this didn't usually sit together. Not in corners, not without an agenda. The world had trained him to separate them with a glance. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, polite but cautious, before the man could open his mouth, before he could lean into explanation or deflection, the way he always did. The girl lifted her chin slightly, her voice suddenly firm in a way that surprised even herself. "He's with me." The sentence was simple, but it landed like a shield slammed into the ground, possessive, protective, final. The waiter blinked once, his expression softening. "All right," he said, scribbling something down. "What can I get you both?" The man felt it then, that strange, unfamiliar heat behind his ribs. Being claimed. Not as a CEO, not as someone important, but as someone who belonged in a small, human moment beside a girl who had nothing to gain from him. No flattery, no expectation, just choice. "She'll have another tea," he heard himself say, his voice steady despite the rush in his veins. "And bring me whatever she's having." The girl looked at him, surprised for a fraction of a second, then nodded faintly. When the waiter walked away, the air around them shifted. The tension didn't disappear. It changed shape. It softened into something quiet and deep and dangerous all at once. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, eyes lowering to her hands, resting on the blanket over her legs. He watched her fingers, pale and trembling slightly. "You spoke first," he replied. "I just followed." A silence followed, heavy with meaning neither of them dared to say aloud. But inside him something had already started to move. Something he had buried years ago, beneath contracts and late nights and locked doors. For the first time in a long while, he felt chosen. A sudden crack of thunder ripped through the air, so loud the window panes vibrated. Conversations in the cafe faltered for half a second. A collective inhale held, then released in nervous laughter. But at the table the girl startled hard. Her shoulders jerked, breath catching in her throat. fingers clenching around the armrests of her chair as if she were trying to anchor herself to the earth. "It's okay," someone murmured nearby. But he wasn't listening to them. Instinct overpowered thought. His hand reached out before his mind caught up, settling gently over hers. Warm skin against cold, trembling fingers. The shock of contact raced up his arm like electricity, but he didn't pull away. Her hand beneath his was delicate, bones light, pulse racing wildly under his palm. Fear, not of the storm, of something older, deeper, buried in memory. The thunder rolled again, farther this time, and she swallowed hard. Her eyes fixed on the window, as if it held a nightmare only she could see. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. "I'm not scared of storms," she whispered almost to herself, as if confessing a lie she'd told too many times, just of being forgotten. The words shattered something inside him, forgotten, the office lights that stayed on long. After everyone went home, the miles of empty corridors in his house, the silence that greeted him at night. He knew that fear. He lived inside it. His hand tightened slightly on hers, grounding both of them. His voice came out low, raw, stripped of title and armor. "You won't be." The moment hung between them, fragile and forbidden, charged with something neither of them had invited, but both of them felt. Her eyes shifted from the window to his face, searching, as if trying to see whether the promise was real or just another kindness the world wouldn't keep. And for the first time, he realized the danger, not the storm outside, but the storm quietly building between them. The tea arrived, steam curling up between them like a quiet barrier and a secret all at once. The barista set the cups down carefully, glancing at their joined hands and then quickly looking away, pretending not to notice the way the world seemed to hold its breath at their table. Neither of them moved to take the cups. His hand was still covering hers. Her fingers were still trembling under his palm. "You shouldn't make promises that big," she said softly, her voice barely more than the whisper of the steam. But there was no accusation in it, only fear wrapped in honesty. He watched her lips as she spoke. Every word felt like it cost her something. "I don't," he replied. "That's why it scares me that I just did." She finally looked up at him again, really looked this time. The sadness in her eyes collided with the loneliness in his. Two different lives, two different wounds, somehow shaped the same way. He wondered what had taken her to break that long ago, what nights had taught her to wait for nothing, to expect silence in place of comfort. "You look like someone who left the light on once." "And no one ever came back," she murmured, as if reading a memory he had never spoken out loud. His breath caught. An image flashed of his child's bedroom, frozen in time. The tiny shoes by the door, the untouched toys, the echo of laughter that no longer existed. He pulled his hand back slowly, not because he wanted to, but because it was suddenly too much. Too close, too real. "How do you know things like that?" he asked, his voice rough now. She glanced down at her legs, at the wheels beside her, at the thin blanket resting over them. "When you stop moving forward, you learn how to see." Her fingers traced the edge of the cup this time. Not the mug from before, but something fresh, warm, new, and "I've had a lot of time to see." The weight of her words settled over him. She wasn't just speaking about herself. She was speaking about him too. Two strangers, both frozen in their own ways. Outside, the rain softened, turning into a quiet drizzle. Inside, something deeper settled in his chest, a slow, undeniable realization. Meeting her was no accident. The cafe slowly began to fill with the softness that follows a storm. Laughter crept back into the air. Chairs scraped, cups were lifted and set down. Life went on in little ordinary ways. But at their table, time still moved differently, as if it had stretched itself thin just for them. He watched a single drop of water slide down the outside of the window behind her, tracing an unsteady path before disappearing at the sill. It reminded him of something lost, trying to find its way home. "You don't even know my name," he said quietly. She looked back at him, and for a second the world seemed to narrow to that fragile space between her eyes and his. "I don't think it matters," she replied. "Not right now. Right now you're just the man who sat down. The simplicity of it struck him harder than anything else she had said. Not CEO, not sir, not stranger. Just a man who had finally chosen to rest in one place. He glanced again at the empty cafe beyond her, then at the warm cup that sent up gentle whispers of steam. He felt the weight of his other life pressing in from behind, the calls he hadn't answered, the decisions he'd put off, the responsibilities waiting like shadows outside the door. But for this moment, none of it touched him. None of it mattered. She shifted slightly in her chair, a faint wince flickering across her face as she tried to hide the discomfort in her legs. He noticed. He always noticed. And something protective tightened inside him, instinctive and dangerous. "You're hurting," he said, unable to keep it from his voice. She hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. "It doesn't stop me from living. It just reminds me every day how fragile it all is." Their eyes locked again, and in that silence, a truth passed between them, unspoken, undeniable. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a collision of two broken worlds, stitching at each other for reasons neither of them could explain. Outside, the last of the rain faded completely. Sunlight broke through the clouds, a pale, hesitant glow touching the edge of the window. Inside, he realized something that both frightened and filled him with an unfamiliar kind of hope. He didn't want to leave the seat she had saved for him.